financial sector in our country is not directly involved in the setting up and the monitoring of the code matters, but they may do this in the banking sector, and there's been pretty big mistakes made in the German banking sector, and part of them is supervision. And particularly the supervision in the so-called Landesbanken, which are the sort of state-owned banks where billions, tens of billions were lost because they had a supervisory system of a very poor quality. I made a survey of the board members, the non-executive board members, and between 90 and 100% were political appointees, no experts. And how can they're all good people, that's not the discussion here, but how can they, without sufficient expertise, not fall prey to the suggestions from these clever investment brokers to buy so-called AAA paper and lose big? These were the tens of billions that were lost at the expense of the taxpayers in Germany through these Landesbank, and it was totally deficient supervision. So I think that's where the BaFin, the Financial Supervisory Authority, got into the act, but they don't play a very official role. Law courts, corporate governance is self-regulation, but nevertheless it needs to be relied on by the markets. And very lately, the German courts got into the act because they found companies who always said, yes, we comply with the code, we comply with this and this, but in the end they behave totally different. So now there have been court judgments where the companies have been found guilty of saying the one thing and doing the other, and that then led to court judgments against them, which is quite helpful in saying to companies, yes, you've got to observe the code, and don't tell us the one thing and do the other. Governance Commission, the very important experience for the actual day today. What we have here in Germany, and I'm a member of this commission since its inception, is an annual review. And we have interim sessions of the experts that help the commission members, but we don't do more than once a year. This has to do with governance being established in the meantime, and there may be more meeting necessities here initially, but it needs to also have a certain stability in the what is in the governance code and what is sort of the idea of the commission on the execution of the code. So that means not having too many changes also, change for change's sake. Because in the end, the companies that have to do it will say, oh, again, yeah, we had this in Germany. They always complain, the companies, but you have to give them little reason, yeah, and say, okay, this is now necessary because of wrongdoing or because international practice has developed. But you cannot do it every 6 months, because then the companies can just not follow. They need board resolutions themselves to really implement all these things. So don't be too diligent with making too many changes in a too short time frame. The Commission, and that's again very interesting and important, does not intervene in individual company issues or rulings. I would consider this a weakness of the German governance system, but it has to do with the Commission being set up of so many different parties. So it would be very difficult for the company representatives on the Commission to say, this other company, and so on. So that's for you to find out how to deal with this, because good governance also comes from the practical application and from making judgments of what is still okay and what is certainly wrong. And so some mechanism should be found, and it would be ideal if you had a secretariat or some place where at least sort of the easier cases could be resolved on the spot, because all these things are helpful to really get governance implemented in the proper way. What we do, however, in order to see whether German companies really comply sufficiently, is we have an annual research which is sponsored by the Commission, and that comes out with pretty good results, but also has the deficit of saying, yes, they comply with all these individual issues, but whether the quality of compliance is good enough. For example, a recommendation in the German code is an annual self-evaluation by the supervisory board, whether they do the right things, whether they ask the right questions, whether they are not falling always to what the strong chairman or CEO says. And that's an important thing, but this is part of the comply or explain declaration. Yes, we do an annual self-evaluation, but how you do it, you cannot legislate or prescribe. You see, with a strong chairman, he might say after the last board meeting of the year, just before Christmas, let's have a glass of wine and see whether we do the right things. And obviously, who will make a discussion about it? And you can do it in the right way, and perhaps not every year, but every third year, that you have an independent consultant who's doing this exercise. And then even the chairman has to listen to what his board members opine on his leadership, because their views are being sent to this independent fellow on a no-names basis. So you get the right kind of back or feedback. Okay. Analysts, yes, scorecard, because it's so evident that good governance makes a lot of sense financially in terms of results for investors and companies. Analysts go for the topic of good governance. They have the scorecard there, and it's a sort of daily do, meaning you have to have enough analysts in this country, and I think as the market is growing, this will be there. Institutional investors, they are the owners, they are the risk takers. In Germany, we have what I call the classic investors, investment pension funds, who are doing most of the governance monitoring. Insurance companies don't do it. And why? Because they have so many important corporate insurance clients. So they are more hesitant in saying this company is not doing so well because it may cost them business. So there's always this competition between the interests of this and that side. International investors have been the key drivers of good governance also into Germany. And they are manifold, particularly in the United States. You have CalPERS, which you may have heard of or already know. You have TRCREF in the UK. You have Hermes, a very important driver. And they are, together with the ICGN, which is the Corporate Governance Network, and others, the drivers of new developments in good governance. Stock exchange, Deutsche Börse. Deutsche Börse